this is the cable here running down. I'll put a little bit of packing just behind this so that it doesn't abrade on the metal edge of this framework. And it comes along, I've cable tied it in place, and then the cable runs along above the glove box through to well, it's actually hidden behind here. It goes across and then over the steering column and along to the power point at the end of the dashboard. The auxiliary half of the cable actually ends its journey here. You can, although the cable is supplied by Pure with auxiliary and power both joined together, but you just pull them apart as you need to, and so the auxiliary cable comes out here. And what we will do is, this is the end of the auxiliary cable. What we've done is that the panel that sits here, immediately underneath the auxiliary socket, I've just cut a little a little U-shaped channel in the joining surface where the panel goes on, and this cable will just pop out through there and then just curve up into the socket. So it will look slightly out of place, but not nearly as out of place as having a huge great cable running around on cross sections of your dashboard. We also have removed, oh, pardon me, finger was covering the camera. As you can see, we've actually removed quite a lot of trim pieces here. The central console actually only technically needed to come out in order to allow us to get the panel out from covering over the upper pedals, but you do have to do that. It all comes out fairly easily, but you do have to go to the trouble of doing it. But that was actually quite useful, as it turned out, because that also gave us very good access to the power supply for the cigarette lighter, which is this socket. And what we've, instead of going to the fuse box is under there. Instead of one of the popular solutions for providing power for accessories is to use a piggyback fuse system that you just plug into an existing fuse point. You choose which fuse you want to use, and it effectively gives you the original fuse, but also allows you to add an extra fuse line piggybacked onto that circuit. Now, that is a good solution. Would have liked to have used it, but the fuse box is located in a place where it would be fairly easy for you to bash it with your foot by accident, and it's got a fairly flimsy plastic cover on it, which isn't there at the moment, but we're going to put that back on. Fairly flimsy plastic cover, and that cover is actually very close up to the fuses, so unless you cut a hole in the cover and somehow try to re-engineer it, you would have to leave the cover off if you wanted to use the piggyback system. And I just was not happy with that because of the potential for kicking this, and I guess a small potential for getting water flinging off your shoes. If you got in the car with very wet shoes, you could potentially fling some drips of water up into the fuse box. Not great. So decided not to use it, and instead we piggybacked on to the feed to the cigarette lighter, which clearly Pure originally anticipated that you would power this from their little transformer device that goes into the cigarette lighter, so they reckon that's a good power supply. I know from the fuse box, the wiring diagrams, that the feed to the cigarette lighter is 20 amp fused, so it's plenty big enough. In view of the fact that this car doesn't even have an actual cigarette lighter, you know, it's never going to light a cigarette, it's only going to power USB accessories, so 20 amp is, you know, way over the top. So I just soldered in the extra feed cable into the original cable, and then that runs back up under the dash and goes back and goes to the cigarette lighter socket, that's mounted at the end there to provide the power for the whole system. The earth side of this equation is actually the black cable. This is the original VW chassis earthing point for the dashboard systems, which is the brown cable, and you can see that I've added the black cable to the same chassis mounting point, so that gives us a good solid earth for powering the system. So we've, having established the power supply, we've actually powered up the system just to test. Before putting all the dash panels back on, we wanted to make sure the system worked, and it appears to be. The head control unit is establishing a connection to the antenna brain, and it found 78 digital radio stations after thinking about it for 30 seconds. So that's great, and it plays. We plugged up the auxiliary port temporarily, and it plays through the stereo just fine. We'll test all the other features subsequently once it's all back together, but certainly the indications are that everything's working fine. So now we just need to pop back on all of the trim panels, and just to give you an idea, the order in which you have to do that is the panel here, just above the pedals, goes back on. Then you can reattach the trim over the lower part of the A pillar. Then you can put lower and upper sections of the center console back in. Then, if I've got this right, yes, I think then you put back on the panel that goes in between the center console and the radio. Just sits here. That goes back on. Then you can fit your little lateral panels that go on the end of the dashboard caps, and that is the whole lot. So that's what we're going to be doing now. So now the job's been completely finished, everything seems to be working. So you can see that we've got the new USB port, which can feed the phone, and the phone's in place. And the antenna brain unit is there, cabling all underneath the dashboard, and the cable just pops through a little channel I cut in the top of this panel, which allows the cable to come through easily. It's not being nipped, and it just goes straight into the auxiliary port on the radio. That works fine. This is the pure head unit. I'll show you that working in a moment. And that is the Brodit assembly for holding the phone. I mean, this particular unit is the right size for an iPhone 10, but this part that screws on to this part, you can get these to suit all manner of phones. It's a pretty robust product in my experience. And then we can just buy a USB cable that connects down to the new USB port. And all of the other panels have all gone back on nice and straight. You know, they're very well designed, so there's lots of fixings, but when everything's in place, it's really solid. And so the only cabling that you've got showing is that short amount, plus the very small amount leading to the antenna. And obviously you've got the head unit, which is standalone, it's battery powered, but that is self-adhesive, fixed onto the dashboard, and we've positioned it in a place where if the Garmin unit is ever needed, that will sit here, and it has just enough clearance to miss the pure head unit. But as I said, the hope was that as long as you're prepared to use Google Maps on your phone for navigation, then you shouldn't ever need to have the Garmin unit in the car at all. All of the music playing, phone making, Bluetooth connectivity to your phone, basically, all of that operates through the pure highway system, as well as picking up a lot of digital radio stations, which this radio couldn't pick up at all before. This is FM only. Okay.